Hi everyone, Sean here. Thanks for taking in this edition of the Take Charge or Change podcast. We've got Dr. Gord Sims, Naturopathic Doctor, joining us on the call. You're going to get to know Gord a little bit more about what a naturopathic doctor does, and he's going to share some really cool ideas around building health resiliency. So I know you'll really enjoy this edition of the Take Charge or Change podcast. Well, it's a real pleasure to have Dr. Gord Sims, naturopathic physician, join us on this edition of the Take Charge or Change podcast. So Gord, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure.
I was really looking forward to having a chance to connect with you, and I know that we're going to have a chance to have future podcasts that we'll talk on a number of different health topics. Today's call, we're going to try to do a couple of things. One is we're going to learn a little bit more about you and what a naturopathic physician does, and then we're also going to talk about a specific area of interest that I think our listeners will really find helpful in terms of their healthcare and building personal resiliency and change readiness. So I guess the starting point is, I know that I think your background didn't start in healthcare. You, I think, have an undergraduate degree in engineering. I'm curious as to your motivations and what kind of led you to the field of healthcare.
Well, I had a very circuitous route. I maintain that it's difficult for people to know how to contribute in life. And I started as an engineer, you're right, mechanical originally. But even within my engineering studies, I started to migrate towards medicine in biomedical engineering. I did some work as an undergraduate in gait analysis on how people walk.
Okay.
But then after graduating, I did a short stint with atomic energy and then worked as an engineer in the Middle East for some period of time, and then I started getting closer to what I actually wanted to do, and that was I came back to Canada, and I ran the robotics and surgery program for a few years for the Department of Orthopedics in Vancouver, and that's when I realized that I wanted to be involved directly in people's healthcare and try to contribute in that capacity, and that's what I felt drawn to.
Okay. Well, I know that the listeners might find this interesting. Is in your journey towards this current role you have, I think you've got at least one patent, right, in the orthopedic world.
Well, that's right. That was a fun chapter. I enjoyed that a lot. It had to do with that's right. There was a patent that developed, and it had to do with how to help the surgeons with how to put an artificial knee in properly.
Okay.
It turns out that one of the challenges with that is just being able to find the center of gravity for the middle of the knee, and was able to contribute there.
Oh, neat. Well, I know that a lot of folks listening would be curious as to the difference between an MD and an ND. So you're an ND. I think we have some familiar with what medical doctors do. How would you kind of describe, there may be some similarities, but maybe differences between an ND, naturopathic physician, and a medical doctor, MD?
Well, the commonality here is it's primary health care. Both MDs and NDs share that same field. Now, what's different? Probably what's most different for people is the toolbox. So the types of strategies, the types of treatments that a naturopathic doctor may use are somewhat different from what a medical doctor might use. Naturopathic doctors often look at lifestyles, look at clinical nutrition, and look at natural medicines, although not exclusively so. So when it comes to what are you going to do about the condition, the lens is a little different on how you look at that.
One of the things I appreciated you had shared with me that I think it's almost your default approach is to look for ways of helping the body do what it does naturally. In other words, don't make take any heroic interventions. Start with a minimalist approach and then coax the body to what it does naturally and intervene as required. Is that an accurate description? Is that sort of the approach?
Well, you're right. What is very helpful about the body is that it's a self-righting organism. It wants to be well. So really the role of the doctor, or as I see it, the role of the naturopath, is often of how can you try to create conditions that allow the body to regain its health. That's often the way I'm thinking about that.
Okay. And when you're working with clients, it's not just, I know that there's maybe some specific things you can give people in terms of supports, whether it's homeopathy or vitamins or minerals or other things you do. Do you spend any time talking about their other wellness regimes, whether it's exercise, their diet, even the stress in their environment?
Oh yes, so absolutely. So I try to engage my patients in a conversation around, let's take a tour of their health, and let's see how each category in their health might affect whatever the problem at hand is, or how we might look at each category in their health and what we need to optimize so that they stay well in their life. So, for example, certainly the points you just touched on are absolutely relevant. You need to talk about how is a person eating and their clinical nutrition. Is there a need for supplementation in certain areas, yes or no? You need to look at their stress, as you just pointed out. You need to help people tolerate their stressors in life. You need to look at their exercise, absolutely. And you need to look in other areas as well, their mental emotional health. So taking a tour of a person's health, that's what we do around here, certainly.
And I notice as part of that, you've got a beautiful facility here in Winnipeg. My understanding is there's 5 other naturopathic doctors in the clinic. But I think you've got more than just the naturopathic doctors there. It's almost like I wouldn't necessarily say full service, but you've got different healthcare practitioners in your clinic. Can you maybe share a little bit about your vision and philosophy as a clinic and how you work with people?
Sure. So about the physical space itself. So we built this clinic in 2007. We returned to Winnipeg in 1998. We were studying in Portland, Oregon, and my wife and I, Suzanne, came back to Winnipeg to start the clinic in 1998, and along with Dr. Dean Schrader. And since then, we've been joined by 2 other naturopathic doctors, Sarah Kozunski and Amy Kraker. Now, so there's 5 of us naturopathic doctors in this clinic, but we've had the pleasure of sharing the space with clinical psychologists who are under this roof as well as a psychiatrist, as well as a massage therapist and a nutritional counselor. So what I like about that is under one roof there are people of different walks, but perhaps a similar vision.
Now, I know that one of the things that prompted my call to you is I happened to take a look at an old newspaper article that I'd kept, and the title of the article was "Take Your IV Vitamins." And I'd actually never heard of this before, the notion of hooking an IV to your arm and megadosing vitamins. And I looked at it in a little more detail, and it was intriguing to me. When I kind of Googled it, and there was a Wikipedia piece on Linus Pauling, who won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry and Peace, who happened to be a real advocate and thought that high-dose vitamin C could have some really potentially good outcomes in terms of fighting cancer and heart disease and other things. And he was, I think, laughed at, thought to be a quack back at that time when he started exposing those ideas. But it seems like the science and the clinical studies are bearing out that there's real efficacy attached to these treatments. And I know that you do it in your clinic. So maybe you could share with me, the main situations where you're using IVs to do high-dose vitamin or mineral supplementation.
Sure. So you make a good point there, the higher dose. So why use intravenous strategies in the first place? And the answer to that would be when you're trying to achieve a higher dose than typically you could get just by orally taking the supplement. So that's the first point. The second point to be made is often people struggle with their absorption of their nutrients. And if that's the case, then you can bypass the gastrointestinal tract and using intravenous therapy. So those are the 2 main reasons why you would consider that in the first place. But you're right. There's a variety of conditions that benefit from that intervention. So Linus Pauling, a fascinating man, and you're right. His research is being vindicated more recently. There's a usefulness in that in cancer care. And there's a usefulness in high-dose vitamin C in terms of boosting the immunity. And you can see that practitioners are using that in a variety of applications, including antivirals, for example.
So obviously in your practice, and you're seeing, I guess, other naturopathic doctors doing it, and you have a patient coming in and they're struggling with cancer as an example. But I think you had mentioned to me even for things like low energy levels, it can be used. Here's a question for you. So, part of, one of our mandates at Take Charge of Change is to try to find strategies, encourage people to explore ways that they can, perform optimally when they need to, particularly if there's stressful or challenging environments that they're in. And I'm intrigued to find out from you whether you think if I was a business professional or in an environment where I knew I was going to be in high stress and I'm trying to preempt that or fortify myself to deal effectively with that stress, would something like a IV supplementation strategy make sense in that context? Do people actually do that kind of thing?
Yes. So we talked about high-dose intravenous vitamin C. Well, let's talk about another strategy, so intravenous Myers cocktail. So a Myers cocktail, for example, is a higher dose B vitamins and B5 in particular, as well as B12. So that type of intervention, a Myers cocktail, can be very useful in a variety of applications, but also very useful for helping to support the adrenal gland. And it's the adrenal gland that is forced to tolerate our stressors in life. So to your point, if a person is knowing that they're going into a period of duress or in a period of duress, if you're trying to help them to tolerate that, to thrive in that, to do well in that, then that is one of the interventions that we use for helping with that.
Oh, it's interesting. It was when I was doing a little bit of research prior to our call. It was interesting to me that I saw that it seems like, in the entertainment industry and even with athletes, I think this is probably not an uncommon strategy. But in terms of the mainstream, you just don't hear about it. But I can see where it could have some real direct application. Maybe not all the time, but like you said, if you're going into situations where you know there's going to be stress and you're called underperform, and it's a classic situation. I remember when I was at university, I'm not sure, Gord, if you experienced this, where you're pulling all-nighters, you're getting ready for exams, you get through the exams, and then spring break happens or reading week, and you just get hit by a bad cold virus or flu, you get sick, and maybe if I'd been using an IV regime, I wouldn't have gone through that.
Well, it's every single day in practice, at some point, in one way or another, a person will bring up the issue of, help me to tolerate the stressors that I have in my life. People don't come to see the doctor to say, how can I reduce my stress in life? People are well qualified to look at their own lives and they know usually they know what they can do. The question that they're putting to doctors like myself are, hey, how can I tolerate the stressors I'm under now and do well under those conditions? And there's a variety of strategies, including, you brought up intravenous strategies, but there's a variety of strategies that help people to tolerate their stressors in life.
I think that's a real practical approach. I mean, it's one thing to say reduce the stressors, but I think a lot of us are in situations where it's not quite that easy. And
well, I bring this exactly. Like I bring it. It made me think of it as you were talking about the university example. For example, there is. I mean, talk about stress, right? Your final exams.
Yeah.
There you are, and there's no getting around it. You have to tolerate that chapter, and there's no getting around it. And isn't life like that, where it has its moments, whether it be work or family or whatever a person's obligations are in life, where you find yourself either burning the candle at both ends or just having to tolerate a tough stretch.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, I wanted to maybe move from the IV intravenous supplementation strategies to something that's probably even more grassroots and pretty common. And I'll introduce this question by an experience that I had a couple of years ago. I came in to see Gord, and one of the things that we did was a test to measure my vitamin D levels. And I thought that I was in really good shape in that area. I was taking a supplement. I was outside regularly riding my bike and in the sun, running and eating foods that had vitamin D. And so I thought, that's the one test I'm not going to worry about. And Gord delivered the results to me, and he said, Sean, this is something we need to focus in on. You're not at the range that you should be. And I was shocked. And in our conversation, I think you mentioned to me is that's probably more the norm than it is a rarity. A lot of people are walking around not knowing that they are they don't have adequate vitamin D levels, and that has potentially some health consequences attached to it. So when you look at vitamin D, but there might be other things. If you had to sort of look back at your clinical experience and working with patients, are there, one or two or three things you typically see that people are deficient in? What might those be, and maybe some strategies that people could take a look at?
Sure. So vitamin D, that has been an interesting conversation over the years. And maybe I could just share a quick little personal note on vitamin D, and then maybe we should talk for a moment about reference ranges for Manitobans. But
Sure.
I'll tell you what really caught my attention on vitamin D. When I started 15 years ago, you rarely talked about vitamin D. Vitamin D was really the research had been on perimenopausal, menopausal women with bone density issues. And then over the years, it became increasingly important. Vitamin D in cardiovascular disease, vitamin D and neurological conditions, MS, Parkinson's, vitamin D and dementia. So it really started making vitamin D and mood stabilization. So it started making its way into many categories. The conversation became wider than we had originally anticipated in medicine. I was at an oncology conference. This was, I don't know how many, would it be 5 years ago now? I was at an oncology conference down in Carlsbad, California. And one of the oncologists that was lecturing, I appreciated their approach to cancer care. One of the oncologists that was lecturing said, "Hey, look, if you practice north of the Midwest, of all the easy things you can do to reduce your cancer risk profile in life, just titre your patient's vitamin D into the appropriate reference range." And I got to thinking, okay, that's interesting.
Wow.
At that time, I was taking 2,000 international units a day. And I think I can say I eat well and I exercise outside. I thought, okay, I wonder what my vitamin D level is. Well, my vitamin D was not within the proper reference range. And I thought, that's interesting. And of course, I subsequently titrated my levels up into the appropriate range. But then I started testing my patients, wondering how they're doing. And the answer is that Manitobans just are not in the, unless you've gone out of your way to get your vitamin D levels into the appropriate reference range, they're just not doing it. So you asked a broad question about what are common problems for this population. Well, I'll tell you what, vitamin D is a common problem, and the good news with that is it's just so darn easy to solve that one.
Yeah. One of the things that we've had a conversation with in the past is this idea of supplementation generally. And so a lot of us are taking things because we think generally it's going to make us healthier or help us to be more resilient to deal with issues that come along to our health. But it's curious to me, Gord, that I'll take my car to the dealership and they have all kinds of diagnostic tests and the computer chips do the readouts and they can dial into the specific issues that car has. And I know things are getting better, but I think the notion of diagnostic testing, not just for the real critical issues that we tend to think of in healthcare, but even just, like you said, vitamin D levels, blood lipid profiles, minerals, a whole host of tests that can be looked at. Are we making progress in that area? Do you think we have a long ways to go in terms of that diagnostic testing and how it can be used to kind of preempt some of these things?
I think that what I've enjoyed over the years is the sophistication of the testing that's now available for looking at, for example, some of our baseline nutrient levels, or looking at the newer testing that helps us to appreciate risk of disease in the future. I really enjoyed that because that's a powerful tool at helping people stay well in the future. But I think maybe I can step back for 1 sec here, Sean. There's this question of where are you at in your health journey? Is a person very commonly a person goes to see the doctor because they have a problem. So first and foremost on a person's mind is often, how do I solve this acute problem that I have?
Yeah.
Then you want a person engaged in the conversation, and so we do that all the time. We treat acute issues that people have and problems that they have. Very shortly after that conversation, you want to be engaging a person in the conversation of, okay, how do you stay well, and how do we reduce a person's risk factors in life, and so that they can enjoy good health throughout their life. Yeah. So yes, there are tests now that yes, there are tests now that are far more sophisticated that we can look at baseline levels and look at risk factors.
Well, I know I appreciate the experience of having a chance to connect with you on that specific area, because I appreciate the fact that I could get much more precise on the supplements that I should be taking. It wasn't a shot in the dark, and we had some objective evidence that we could use to sort of customize the supplementation program. We've just begun to explore some really interesting areas, and I'm really excited, Gord, to connect with you on future podcasts over the next year. And I want to sort of end our conversation by asking the question, let's say their interest has been piqued. They've never sat down with a naturopathic doctor. They have, their traditional relationship with the MD, but they're maybe thinking that maybe they should have an ND as part of their healthcare team. If someone wanted to connect with one of the doctors in your clinic, what does that process look like? Is it pretty straightforward, just a phone call? What would somebody do?
People are very welcome to call the clinic if they like, and they'll be seen by one of the doctors here for sure.
We will, in the show notes of this podcast, we'll include contact information and a little more detail about Gord and his clinic. So we'd encourage people to take a look at that and visit the website for the clinic. And Gord, I really appreciate the fact that you took time again out of your schedule to join us today. And like I said, I'm looking forward to future conversations down the road.
Well, very nice chatting. Thanks for the interest.
It's been great. Well, that concludes my conversation with Dr. Gord Sims. If you'd like to get more information about Gord, his clinic, and expanded commentary and content on the subject covered during the podcast, I'd encourage you to take a look at the show notes beneath the podcast video. As well, when you visit the Take Charge to Change website, I'd encourage you to register for the Resiliency Toolbox. In there's a lot of great resources, including access to a quarterly newsletter, resiliency bulletins, and a number of videos on the topic of building personal resiliency.